founder and CEO of a company called Harappa Education. Harappa is essentially an online learning institution where we teach cognitive, social, and behavioral skills. This is a fascinating discussion for me because at Harappa, our target sort of audience or the learners that we work with are essentially professionals at the workplace or actually postgraduate students. But it's always interesting to know what's happening in the schools that's leading to us having to work with learners on cognitive, social, and behavioral skills. There's lots of rich discussion for us to have. And with that, I'll just request sort of just in the order of the names that are up on the screen, if the panelists can introduce themselves. I think that always leaves a nice touch, maybe 25, 30 seconds each. So Geeta, if I can ask you to go first, please, and then we can follow that order.
Sure. Good evening, everybody. It's wonderful to be part of this panel. I'm Geeta Jain, principal of Legacy School, Bangalore. We are a K-12 school offering the IB and the A-level program. And for us, the vision of our school is learn, discover, reflect, and evolve. And every mission of us, philosophy is guided through that. So that's a short note about me.
Thank you, Geeta. Lovely to have you. Yes, Kavita.
Yeah, hi, very good evening to each one of you. I'm Dr. Kavita Bajpai, based in Mumbai, but I have started my own school 2 years ago. This is located in Thrissur, Kerala, and this is a Cambridge school. And of course, we have plans to come up with the IBDP program as well. And the vision of the school is learn, apply, and lead. So basically, this is something what we want to, inculcate in our young humans whom we are catering to.
Thank you, Kavita. Lovely to have you. Abhimanyu.
Hi, this is Abhimanyu Basu. I'm from Dhirubhai Ambani International School. I've been here for the last 17 years. And my current position is the academic director. I look after the international section, also heading the project where we are expanding into a second school very soon. And I work with IB very extensively as a workshop leader, team visit member, consultant to new schools, and a range of roles. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Great to have you. Marie, everyone has set you up for this introduction. There are 2 IB schools and one soon to be an IB school. So lovely to have you, and tell us a little bit about yourself, please.
Thank you. Good afternoon, evening. It's actually early morning. I sit in the IB office in the U.S. in the Washington, D.C. Global Center. I'm Marie Vivas, and I am the Senior Development Manager. So I have worked in IB for 8 years. I help with university relations, and I help new schools in the Americas that are interested in bringing on IB programs and help manage a team that does that work. And additionally, I have myself worked in IB schools since the early 90s. So I'm an IB old timer, taught French and did college counseling in a variety of different international schools, as well as doing international admissions at Jacobs University in Bremen, Germany. So coming from a lot of different sides of the desk, and happy to be here with this panel of great institutions. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And thank you for waking up bright and early to be able to join us. I'm sure that means a lot to Suchita and Syed and that team. My son also actually goes to an IB school. So I think this is a perfect storm to discuss a new curriculum. Okay, with that, let me get started. As Suchita was mentioning when she was introducing the panel, at Harappa, when we said cognitive, social, and behavioral skills, one of the courses we had as part of our lead habit it's a course called Embracing Change. It essentially has elements of positive psychology on great resilience and setbacks that we have been amazed and astounded that has got 70,000 learners in the last 3.5 months, because clearly there is the course resonates with everybody having to navigate this change. Let me begin with all of the school administrators here, because nobody has had to, embrace change as much as all of you. Geeta, please begin by telling us, how have you embraced change? And most importantly, what are you doing now that you hadn't ever even thought of before?
Well, Shreyasi, I think as all schools, I'm sure we had to reconfigure our approaches to teaching and learning. I mean, the change was inevitable, it was happening, and we had to embrace it. So there was no second thought on that in any case. I would say that this is renaissance of pedagogy at this point in time. I mean, we've just reached that stage. So as a school, we have been considered to be a very progressive school because we already were a school which believed in an open classroom. Our school has been built very purpose built. We have open classrooms without walls. We are a very tech integrated, heavy embedded school with technology. We are also having this system where we have mentor-mentee. So all those aspects which is needed, which we feel a lot of relevance. And for us to adapt and move wasn't so hard. But despite that, we did notice that we still had to skill our teachers. We knew they could adapt, but it had to shift overnight. To shift focus overnight was not easy. But I think since we were trained, so it just became slightly more easier than some of my counterparts who felt that it was hard. But overall, I think the transition hasn't been bad at all. Of course, we had to relook to say what tools we need to use, what skills we need to do, what is the screen time we need to do it for different age groups. So all that again came in. There's very, very less literature available across the world right now. They're not white papers. So we really were, there were conflicting views which were coming in, what is the right approach? So we had to use different intelligence to see what is relevant and what is right for our school. I think so that stood well. And so far, we have had a happy cohort of parents, students, and children. Feedback from children, parents have been a very important, integral part of our decision making. We take surveys from children, parents, just saying, is it enough? Is it not okay? And of course, now government regulations have come in, so we're just abiding by those rules. But I think the parents and the students have been pretty understanding. And our community of staff has also been very, very, proactive in the way we have adapted and adopted.
So tell me, as an IB school, and I think that's relevant for all of the two other schools also represented by the leaders here, is already much more tech literate, right? The teachers are trained much more. So obviously you're right to say that the transition was easier for you than for a lot of the other schools. Yet, what was that one thing, despite sort of having this tech-friendly mindset, the tech infra, that really surprised you and really needed all of you to bring grit and resilience to the forefront? What has been really tough? Like, what has given you sleepless nights?
I think it happened is it me again? I don't mind going in.
Yes.
Overnight, we had to shift gears, just overnight, because it just announced next day we were in the midst of an examination. We really didn't know how to go about. And we just said, okay, how are we going to work this out? Where academic integrity is such a huge thing. And we're saying, oh God, how are we going to work it? But what was really, we said, okay, we're going to put the onus on to children and parents right now. We're going to say they are going to take responsibility. So the beauty of it was our parents really became the proctors of exams. They just put on the badge of what a teacher would have done. And the students in school uniform, they're just sending us pictures, and exams when it happened, for us, we said, we values what we want them to imbibe. I think that just got personified in real life. And we said we get caught up with, policies and this one, academic honesty. But we felt when it was testing time, we really saw examples of that happening. And IB learner profile, I think that just became personified by every student when it came to, they're living it. So they were living it and breathing it in real life. And that's what you want children to be doing.
Sure, great. I mean, can you please come in here and add to the discussion to say, Geeta touched upon the point that teachers, although prepared, had to be almost re-prepared because nobody imagined doing this fully online overnight, right? What has been the biggest challenge for you when it comes to motivating, energizing, as well as helping teachers navigate sort of this new reality for themselves?
One of the things, initial challenge was obviously to get the whole infrastructure ready. I don't think any school was ready for that infrastructure. So overnight, the lockdown happened around, we had the first case in Mumbai in the first week of March, somewhere around that. And around that time, according to our medical protocol that we had raised, we decided to close school because, that was our thing, that if there is a case which happens in Mumbai, then we are going to close school. It happened very close to our spring break. And it was the 10th of March, I can remember. And we decided to close school 2 days early for the spring break. And after that, the government came down with the regulation of closing down schools. The exams got cancelled. What did happen was that we worked around the clock we were in talks with Microsoft at that point of time. Not at that point of time. It was probably happening from January because we were getting onto Microsoft Teams as a learning management system, and it just got fast forwarded. So what happened was that over the next 10 days, we had 140 teachers and another 60 staff members who got trained. And we conducted those trainings remotely. The trainers were remote. All of us were sitting in our own houses. Initial challenge was connectivity and devices, because some people didn't take their devices when they left school, thinking of the fact that they would come back, and they couldn't come back. So there were a few people who were like that, and there were a few who didn't have good connectivity at home. So I think we had to ensure that everyone had that whole choice. But I think in terms of getting the staff on board, I think everybody was on board. You know, they put in relentless number of hours. And then we did it staggeredly. So we didn't actually lose any single working day, because we were supposed to open on the 23rd, and we did on the same day, virtually. And then we sort of carried on. We didn't have any examinations which were left for the board classes. Those were all complete. We started with, finishing with their parent-teacher meetings and the closure with grade 10s and 12s, because by that time the news came in that they won't have examination. And then we moved on from there with starting of the classes. We did it staggeredly, and then appropriately with students of classes. And so the timings were sort of different, and then we gave in gaps in between. We took in feedback from the people. There were constant surveys which we had put forward on a weekly basis. And I think, so what happened then, that everyone was part of this whole thing. So we were all in it together, whether it was the parents, the students, the teachers. And I think the joy that we saw on the faces of the children to interact, to just get that opportunity to interact with each other in the classroom, that was priceless.
Excellent. And you're saying, a school as well outfitted as yours, which sits in the center of the financial district of the country, would also have students with low connectivity. Then that issue for sort of other schools continues to be a massive problem for us to solve in India, right? I'm going to come back and double click on the student responses that both you and Geeta said in terms of the polls and surveys that you did, and to see what we found. But just to go to Kavita here, Kavita, yours is a smaller school and maybe would not have had the teacher training or the IT infrastructure as ready to respond as seamlessly as maybe Abhimanyu and Geeta could. Share your experiences of, how have you navigated the change, and what has been the one big learning?
Okay, so first thing, this may be a misconception for many. Being a new school, probably we were not ready. But let me just correct you all here, and let me just convey it to each and everyone here. The school we started in the year 2019. The operations we have started in the year 2019, wherein we we conceived the idea of starting the school in 2017. So you can understand there were 2 years in between, and we never wanted to just get into the school education. I mean, of course, I have been into education for past 22 years, and I was very sure that I don't want to start the school for the sake of starting the school. The first 2 years have gone into a lot of research, lot of, the infrastructure development and teachers training. So even our school was one of those schools which took the teachers on board much prior to the day we launched our school. So I think we were very much ready for this kind of scenario. There were two reasons behind it. One is the school is based out in Thrissur. And Thrissur is basically, it has a migrant population. So where most of, or rather almost, 90-95% of the families, they have one or the other family member abroad. But in Kerala, one thing is very strong, that they want to be, connected or rooted always with their culture. So we were getting the admission calls, we were getting the admissions, I'm talking about last year, where children were away, but they want to come and join the school. So, and of course, they were joining depending upon how their session was ending. So in the beginning only, we had to create a virtual learning platform. So basically what we had to do is, with this pandemic situation, bring in this virtual learning platform for all. Otherwise, it was happening for few students, like someone whose session was getting over by August and was landing in India in September. So we were, as it is, providing this kind of the learning there. So now what happened is when this pandemic situation arrived, and Trishur was one city where I'm sure you all are aware of that the first case was identified in Trishur in January on January 30th. So since then, there were some talks. There was something in the air that the schools will have to change their approach, and probably, and we were somewhere mentally ready by the time the nationwide lockdown was announced. So we could do a lot of things, and in fact, when we switched entirely to the virtual learning, for us it was quite a seamless transition, because earlier also our educators were creating the capsules and they were sharing it with the children who were away from the school. Apart from that, our school also has a policy: if someone goes on a approved leave, because the children who are staying in Thrissur, maybe their parents are staying, say, in Norway. There was a case. There was another case where parents were in Australia, but the child was in Thrissur with the grandparents. So in such cases, the children were given the approved leave from the school, when for 15 days or 3 weeks they were traveling to their parents, or they were visiting their parents. So in that case, there that time also we ensured that no class should be missed. We were creating the capsules, and we were providing the support in terms of teaching and learning process. So basically everything has happened for the entire school then, I mean, rather than focusing on 2 3 students or 4 students for that matter. But yes, for us it was not a big change, because we were already doing a part of it. So yeah, I mean, once we started with our, and we were the first one to start the virtual classes in Thrissur. I mean, though we are a new school, but we were the first one to start virtual classrooms, wherein others followed the lead, and others took almost 1 month time to follow. So you can understand like what was our level of readiness and preparedness. So yeah, I
Excellent.
mean, of course, when the children are not coming to school, of course, we feel bad, because school is not just about the curriculum or the school building or the school campus or the infrastructure. I think school is the school when children are coming. But safety comes first and foremost. So they are at home, our teachers are home. Most of our teachers were the outstation teachers. So they are in their respective towns or respective cities. But yeah, things are moving, and we are hoping that soon we all will be back on ground in the school, because once
Great.
the children are there in the physical world of the school or the real
Of
world of the
course.
school, I think the learning will be on a different tangent altogether. But yeah, I mean,
We,
for us, it was not a struggle, not a struggle.
Okay, great. We'll come back to that, Marie. Here you have examples of three sort of case studies of very resilient educators and schools that were able to respond, whether because they were more tech, sort of, future oriented, tech savvy. Give us a perspective of schools from the larger IB affiliation, right? And interesting geographical learnings that you're seeing, how different school systems have adapted.
Well, it's interesting because we're talking about an overnight change for a vast majority of our stakeholders, whether they're in the Americas or in the Asia Pacific region or in Europe, Africa, Middle East. So for IB schools at many different locations and different resourcing, it's been an interesting concept. But I think that the important thing to remember that is that IB schools are are supporting themselves and each other, as well as our organization supporting the concept of a growth mindset, of continuously being prepared and reflecting upon how the communities can work together, so that that process of constant reflection and self-evaluation and continuous self-assessment in schools does actually help prepare schools for change. So we saw that schools were in effect able to pivot in a fairly nimble manner to a new environment because of the constant self-reflection, self-assessment, as well as the fact that school communities around the world that are doing IB are also engaged in professional development and anchoring themselves to best practices, to good pedagogy, and also to constant upskilling. But I think that the most important thing that brings us all together, you know, with varying degrees of technology and connectivity around different parts of the world, is more about how we learn and what we encourage students to do. So the focus on developing strong skills, the focus on social and emotional learning, on self-awareness, on self-management, and these are things that we encourage in our students, but these are also things that we're encouraging in our schools and communities. So that process of collaborative responsibility for our learning and teaching is really at the core of why IB schools were able to make the switch in a fairly nimble way in terms of making sure that the student experience, that the community experience maintained engagement, maintained that sense of owning the process of learning. And so to me, that's the perhaps the core, the grounding of what the IB has helped schools with through this process. Students, teachers, administrators were already working collaboratively. And what that means is that bringing in the parents and the community became easier with that mindset.
I think you've used some really important words, whether it's collaborative leadership, whether it's owning the process of how we learn, but there's self-management and self-governance, and not just to students, but of course, extending that to the staff and the teachers, right? And here I'd like to pivot to the conversation and put it first to you and then take it to others. I think teachers, one, first from a curriculum perspective, right? I mean, an IB for sure might be considered one of the best pre-university curriculum, most evolved in terms of its connection to life skills. But despite that, what in the last 3.5 months has shown all of you as well that was still missing in even that curriculum to respond to real life as the way that we're seeing it? What are likely to be curriculum shifts or concept or content shifts that you're all considering to prepare high schools for change even better?
Well, it's interesting because, in terms of content, the rigor of the diploma program's content and certainly the constant reflection on what do students need to learn is very tied into this. So remember the IB curricula, all of the courses are on a 7-year review cycle with innovation and the latest technologies and latest concepts in pedagogy being incorporated um, into curricula on a regular basis. So we don't have something that is set in stone from 50 years ago when we started. We have been in constant evolution, an evolution that includes preparing students not just for the technological changes, because we have incorporated technologies as they have become widespread and available, and in many cases have been cutting edge in incorporating technologies. But in addition to that, looking at content from the perspective of first of all global education. So what do students require? And global education does take into account, in fact, connectivity remotely, because we are, as a society in the fourth industrial revolution, really overcoming national barriers, school barriers, and putting ourselves out on a global perspective. So our curriculum and our content has to change to adapt to that global education, and at the same time, keep in mind to ground the students in their community, in their local perspective, so that they come with that understanding of how those two, the global and the local, are connected. And so I would say to you that curricularly, this is something that IB has been doing for decades. In terms of how that has been challenging in this particular period, I think that as we move forward, I think schools are starting to really understand, as well as we are in the organization, the need, the real need for continuing to grow the social and emotional skills for students. And so while it was, 4 months ago, we could bring students to the classroom and have them seated in rows and say, okay, everybody take out your notebooks. We are more and more relying on students being able to manage their own learning. And what that means for teachers is taking that to a next level of staying engaged while not having the students present physically in front of you. So how do we use technology not just as technology, but as a tool for engagement, as a tool for critical use of knowledge and transmission of knowledge? So I'll stop there and let others take
Yeah, no,
a look at
definitely.
this.
Thank you very, and I'm going to make the conversation a little bit provocative now. And I think anyone can jump in really, because after we've had your opening comments, I think there are two things. And this is both as an educator and somebody who's leading an education business, and as well as obviously as a parent who's seeing this. One, we've all spoken about teachers, right? And how teachers either seamlessly transitioned or were trained already or were oriented, were committed. I think no questions about what teachers have had to do all across the world. But how are we confident that now that students have been out of school and sort of become used to, in any case, learning online, how are we so sure that they'll come back to enjoy the physical classroom? Because isn't one of the big problems that truly exists in our systems is teachers can seem very dull and uninspiring to most students, right? And therefore that engagement and that classroom experience is dead for many students. How are we going to make teachers be more inspiring? I have a favorite podcaster and a blogger called David Perel, and he says something very interesting, which I think is so true. If I even see my teenage son, is that teachers have to be more like entertainers than only educators, especially in a medium like this. And I'd love to understand what each one of you thinks about that.
What you said, Shresi, I think that's absolutely correct. And in this present scenario, what happened is this pandemic situation has actually been able to change the, assumption what people had about the educators, because through these virtual classes, I think there are various sides of an educator had come forward. This I can say, of course, as a mother of two teenage girls also. So I've seen how their classes are being conducted, how the fun element is also coming in between, how the monotony is going to be broken. How the monotony is being broken by the educator, and how, she or he is ensuring that all the children are attentive, because, these teenager children, being a mother yourself of that age group, you can understand that the screen is on, teacher is speaking, and suddenly they go mute. Suddenly the camera,
They're on
they
their
want to switch it
phone,
off.
they're on their
Yeah.
phone, they've
So
put screenshots of themselves, so they've been
absolutely,
doing all kinds of
absolutely.
things.
Yes. But I have seen this was happening initially, and how beautifully teachers have started engaging them into their talks, into their conversation. So one very good thing what I have seen right now, the learning is not happening the straight kind of a learning. There is a lot of involvement in the learning is happening. Luckily, both my girls are also with the IB school, so I could see that kind of the progressiveness. But also, if I go back to my school where my children are, the school is right now up to grade 6, but I've seen how teachers are so upbeat about, every day preparing a new circle time, a new activity for them where they all are getting engaged, and from there they're extracting the concept of theme which they are they are progressing the day with. So I think right now this is a time when people should change their perception that the educator or in education, it is more of a dull and a boring kind of a job. Probably they've seen the 360-degree kind of the change basically in a teacher's perception. And at least as a mother, I can see the way I have find teachers are engaging the children, or as the founder of the school, I can see how beautifully children are engaged, because sometimes I do log in just to see what's happening in the class, just out of my curiosity, and the kind of the feedback we are receiving from the parents. So I think that's quite encouraging. So what I feel is probably a little more skill development in general. I'm not talking about my school or Geeta's school or anywhere Abhimanyu school, because these are the school, they are somewhere little ahead of time. But in general, if I feel, I think little more, the
Training.
support and little more training, skill development, skill segment has to be, given little more emphasis upon. So
So
I'm sure the things will be very different.
So Geeta and everyone, you come in here to say that how will your best teachers compete with the best YouTubers that all our kids are watching? And I think in the last 4 months have been watching more of, because we also don't have anything to say to them beyond a point to get them off the streets. And that's really become the way that they learn. They're also watching best content production quality, whether it's on Amazon, Netflix, Hotstar. And those are subliminally, it's a way of content that they receive and learn that they get used to and hooked to. And I think educational content will also have to be positioned and delivered like that in almost an entertaining manner. And have you both been thinking about that?
Yeah, I think yes.
Come,
As
Geeta, go first. Yeah.
we have to relearn the new order of a classroom teaching. It is time for everybody to adapt. And also the fact, like as Kavita said, as teachers, they have to skill themselves. And we as a school have to facilitate that learning for everybody, for the teachers, so that, children, like you said, that YouTubers, I was reading an interesting concept, like how education probably is moving from a pedagogy to an andragogy to a hudagogy, where it is not where the pedagogy is basically a teacher directed lesson, to an andragogy where it's learner directed, whereas the hudagogy is about learner determined. So IB probably, I mean, if you're looking at that aspect, we are talking about empowering children to embrace what they want to learn. So this is what, I mean, the change is going to happen, and we all have to adapt to make sure that learning is as engaging, as inviting for children, so that we stay relevant. Schooling remains, we are not going to de-school. We have to be relevant to adapt to these children and their needs.
And not just what they learn, but how they learn it, in what content formats they want to learn it, in what content packets they want to learn it. Abhimanyu, you come in here and please add to this.
Yeah, sure.
What kinds
So,
of instructional design are you thinking of?
see, we didn't do anything differently. We just made sure that everyone was comfortable on the platform. Our strength as a school is that we believe in very top quality teaching and learning. What we did is we formed a professional learning community in the school once we did the training. And when you have got 150, 200 teachers, you always have some people who are ahead of the curve and some people who are behind the curve. And you just need to ensure that everyone supports each other. How you as a whole community will support each other. We ensured that we were delivering the holistic curriculum that we were supposed to do. So including physical education, giving gaps between classes, movement regime in between classes so that they're not stuck into the chairs, bringing in dance, bringing in music, bringing in physical education classes, bringing in fitness classes. The students came up. The grade 10 and grade 12 students said, can we come and help? Because they had nothing to do. They were sitting at home. I said, why not? They started conducting co-curricular classes for the children. So it was by the students for the students. They designed the whole regime. And then other schools around the Round Square network, we approached them because those children were sitting at home. They all came on our platform and we were conducting classes for them. Our robotics team, they were sort of impressive. They wanted to conduct classes and they went ahead and they sort of started training classes for the rest of the children. So it was a very interesting, engaging atmosphere. Sorry, that's my phone ringing from somewhere.
But don't worry about it. But two questions. Aren't you worried that in 6-7 months, because by the time this ends, and none of us know when children will be back in school full time, sort of in the manner that they used to before, or if they will be, and we'll come to that conversation later. And don't you think that in some ways the way that they approach learning, the classroom and the teacher and the lesson design would have, shifted forever, and that you can't bring them back to what you used to do in January and February?
That is inevitable. I think the learning management system that we have moved on to, it's going to be a permanent shift now. Whether we will be in school or whether we are not going to be in school. We are currently having all the lessons recorded so that, if there are children and, you can be in Mumbai, but Mumbai is a big city. We have children coming from every corner of the city, and there are some places where you will have people who are experiencing connectivity issues. And this is true for India all across. So lessons being recorded that gives them the flexibility and freedom to do it. We are doing synchronous and asynchronous so that, there are some parts the children are doing on their own so that they are not constantly sitting in front of devices. But the pedagogy, what is coming in, how you are delivering those lessons, probably not talking so much, not being completely teacher directed, student led. And now with the breaking rooms which are coming into the platform, so you can conduct those discussions, ask them to sort of come back and talk to them. You can pretty much run. The most challenging part was to actually develop an examination protocol, and we
And
conducted
that's
the final examination with the exam protocol, with sort of a camera which was looking onto their desk, and a front camera which was looking onto them with the thing that we were looking on with the stuff. And then I shared it with the rest of the IB schools, because a lot of schools reached out after they heard that we were successful in doing that protocol. And many of them actually reached out. So I feel that, this whole aspect of sharing, I, I have felt that I have never connected so much with educators within India. People are all reaching out to each other to understand, network, and share best practices. And I wish that it's going to be one
that's that's
permanent
that's
thing.
true. I think that's true for all of us, that we're all meeting and talking and conversing much more. In 20 seconds, one question: you said there were some teachers who are going to be ahead of the curve in the new format. As in a group, it will always happen. What are the three attributes you think that make somebody, a teacher, adapt to this online learning model much better, that you would like to take to all of the other teachers? What are the three attributes?
I'll just tell you, one is probably there are genuinely some people who take to technology fast. It's very innate. Okay. And the second quality is adaptability. And the third one will be flexibility,
Okay.
as overall qualities. So first one
Yes.
is inbuilt. Some people just like technology and some people do not like technology.
Like,
And
I think that's a good. So
the
just
other
being
two
tech
are
fluent,
attributes.
mindset attributes. Marie, come in here. Even with a great curriculum, the fact is this learner's experience of any curriculum is really the teacher, right? And what is it that you have now learned as well, and insights that are coming to you from schools all across the world, to ensure that the way that you train teachers is going to shift significantly to prepare high schools for change?
Well, I think that certainly the concept of the classroom where a teacher stands up in front and lectures for 40 minutes and then gives a quiz has gone out the window. And but my hope is that hasn't been happening in IB schools for a very long time, because certainly that's not what IB is seeking to implement in schools. So when we talk about best practices, including all of our professional development, we're bringing teachers together around the challenge of engaging students in a variety of different ways, as it were, to apply multiple intelligences to learning and multiple approaches to learning. I mean, we even call it approaches to teaching and learning, and we're not just discussing that amongst teachers. We are discussing that with our students as well as with our communities. So to me, the 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 sort of let's say special sauce that IB brings to the mix is precisely this idea that students must actually engage and take responsibility for their own learning, and by engaging them in a variety of different ways. So the concept of, I wouldn't say teacher as entertainer, but teacher as engager would be perhaps a more appropriate description of what we're trying to get at, and what IB students and teachers do together every day, whether it's in their virtual classroom or in their in-person classroom. So the content, we expect teachers to be experts in their subject. That's a given. If you're coming in as particularly for the diploma program, we are expecting teachers to have that level of knowledge of their content. But what IB tries to bring to the table is, how do we present it differently? How do we upend the classroom, as it were, and turn it into a learning lab where everybody is engaged, where students can also innovate, where teachers and students together can come up with different ways of approaching the subjects that really foster not just learning in the moment, but learning for the future and transferability. So even the fact that the IB requires schools to have collaborative planning vertically across from the grades, lower grades to the upper grades, but also horizontally across disciplines, does mean that the entire community is working on how do we engage better. And I go back to student-centered learning. At the
Okay,
key of it is student-centered learning.
so any high school for change for you is student-centered learning, and in any case, there has to be a teacher as a content disseminator, to teacher as an, you won't go as far as to say teacher as an entertainer, but certainly teacher as an engager, and maybe in some cases teachers as an entertainer is what we need to build towards. Again, one another provocative question, which I know will dishearten some of the school leaders in this panel. Are children really missing school? I'm in Delhi. My child goes to one of the best IB schools here. All his friends go to, the best schools in Delhi. I haven't seen children crying, I miss school so much. When will it open? When can I go back? And shouldn't that change? And what does that really tell us about schools? Not being able to respond to what Marie was saying is student-centric, because I still feel as we talk about the high school for the future and our high school that is prepared for change, let's fix some of the fundamentals. What is going wrong still in the school and student relationship?
With us, we did a survey, Shresi, and we did a survey basically just to find out. We just did it last week, and interestingly, the same question we asked them, do you miss school, and what aspect of school do you miss? And during that time, we got 80% of the students, the high school students, especially grade 11 and 12, whose survey response was that they miss school, they miss the physical setting. And the reason why, I think the first thing which stood very strong for them was the PE field, the sports ground. And then again,
that's true. That's the one thing they do miss.
I think, and the friend circle. So that's some aspect that's so teenage. And I think it's very humanistic more than anything, because you miss the social contact. Learning does happen virtually, but I think more than that, what you do as a community, reaching out to people, in a very physical context, I think that's what, I don't know, I personally feel that will be a big miss. Even if we transform, and we are forced to transform, how are we going to satisfy that human need of having that personal connect? So that's something which saddens me sometimes, but let's see how these data points would emerge, and we will say which was a successful model for future educational theorists.
No, and absolutely, you're so right about the physical education and the sports part of it, especially for students and kids who are much more inclined towards that. I think it has been an even tougher, change to navigate, right? Because that has been such a big part of their life. So you feel students do miss school, but miss it for the PE ground and for their friends, and not so much for the teachers and the learning. But that doesn't worry you? That insight in some level wasn't disheartening?
I think probably that was expected, because even in a classroom, when you're teaching learning, we were anyway doing a classroom, a Google Classroom, Google Hangout, even before this was happening, because extra classes with the children stayed away. So we were anyway engaging with children, and they had got a flavor of what virtual classes was happening. So anytime they had a free period, it was always saying, oh, can we go to the sports field? Can we play football? Or we can have lunch with our friends. So that was something which they cheered for. And I don't think so. I feel no, they need that share of it, and we shouldn't be denying that at all for them.
No, of course not.
I feel that's what they should get it.
Okay, Kavita and Abhimanyu, what do you think? Do you think your students really miss school and really miss the teachers and the classes, or what are they missing?
Yeah, so I think right now I can answer in two parts. One is from my school side, but again, the school is not a high school as yet. So I can only talk about those young babies who are, right from pre-K to grade 6. And yes, they do miss, because, they do miss their homeroom teachers, because they're so used to of their teachers all being always around. And, there was a transition, when they're coming from K2 to grade 1, or they're going from grade 4 to grade 5, or grade 5 to grade 6. So those transition period, when there were many things which they were not able to confine, or they were not able to express to their parents or back in the family, they were understood, they were very well understood by the teachers. So I think that's the biggest benefit of having the homeroom teachers around. So yes, they do miss, because sometimes when the classes are on and in between the classes, suddenly the question will pop in from one of the students, Miss, when are we going to come to school? So it means that that shows that yes, somewhere this missing element is very much there. They not only miss those activities and those, the playground, as Geeta rightly said, but yes, they do miss the physical presence of their educators around. Because of course we are not compromising with the school calendar, whether it is a World Environment Day or it is, the World Yoga Day, or whichever activities are coming in, we are engaging even the parents also in most of our activities. And we are also doing a lot of work towards the flipped classroom, where we are engaging parents also to be a part of it. So it's happening. But yes, they're coming to school, the school is missing as well as they are also missing. So that is one side. Now the second part, when I look at my own girls, I mean, as I said, they are 16 and 13. So the real teenager element is very much, there, quite fierce in them. So there, when we talk about, yes, I remember this Monday when they started with their new sessions, online classes or the virtual classes again. On the 5th, I could see that kind of, happiness quotient, like, okay, from tomorrow they are going to be there in front of their children, I mean, their peer group, their teachers and everything. And I think whole of 5th was one of the most happiest day during these lockdown period at our place, because I could see that kind of excitement.
How
So
nice. That's wonderful.
they are missing, of course, being on the playground. They are missing, their peer group, their friend circle, and overall, I think the feel that yes, that routine. What I feel is they are missing, because otherwise, bringing this particular age group into a set routine is the most difficult task. As I always say that quarantine is something should not be a new term for teenagers, because I think they are most of the time in their quarantine. But
that's true. I think it has suited them perfectly. This is like the perfect crucible for what they want to do in any case.
Absolutely. But what I have seen is, their that routine. So it's a school which routine they follow happily. Otherwise, no other routine, I don't think so.
Routine.
At one go, they would readily agree to follow. So it's all about
That's
the
true.
routine. And, yeah.
So Abhimanyu, and we'll take now, after the sort of this comment from Abhimanyu, we'll go to the questions that are coming in from the audience as well. So Abhimanyu, you were also saying that you had done some surveys. Tell me, are your students really missing school? And if whatever they're missing, what are they missing?
I think they're tremendously missing school. There are kids from the kindergarten up to grade 12. I hear parents telling stories and children writing to us that they can, do anything to come to school. And it's one thing that they're missing. It also emphasized the fact, there's been this debate which has been on, that will schools at all survive in the future with technology, and can't people all be homeschooled and all of that? And I'm quite convinced with this 4 months that schools will survive. And the reason the schools will survive is that, this whole aspect of interaction between the children is something which makes the place where everyone needs to come in. The warmth, the love, the connection that they get from each other, and the school, they really look forward to come to every single day. I mean, there are kids. We started classes for our youngest learners, the latest, and obviously, when they see their older brothers and sisters sitting in front of the computer, this child goes and asks the parents that, when will my class start? Because, and it's not about the class, it's not about sitting in front of the computer, it's about when will I connect with my friends. And when I look through that, sometimes the students, because they have all their IDs, and we are on Microsoft, which is a very sort of secure platform, because nobody without an ID can get in. You can see sometimes these kids are just connecting after school, they're just chatting with each other, and they're working on a project. So that whole thing, that if the children are missing anything, is the connect. And I think that again proves that what schools give to them in a larger context. Forget about education. I mean, they get education, but I think they would love to be without education for 4 months, right? They would love to be
I don't think anybody's going to miss that.
For 6 months. They cannot live without their friends, and I think that's where that's where I think, even with these governments coming in regulations that, you just leave the children on their own. I think everyone needs to think about that social aspect, because social and emotional aspect of the children is a very, very important thing as well under this scenario. And they can give strength to each other at this point of time, that maybe even 10 to 15 minutes that, they can get to chat and, just free unstructured time between themselves is going to give them a lot,
Lot.
because
So has
all of
yeah.
us it's about 120 days, all of us have not moved out of our houses.
That's true. I think that's true. And I hope that has been a useful reminder for all of you to say that really what the student social connect with and emotional connect with the schools is obviously the peer connect that they get and the friendships that they make. And obviously we will all fuss about the curriculum, the pedagogy and the teacher training, but really at the heart of the school experience for the learner and the student, it is things like the playground and their friends and being able to chat with them, which defines it. And I think that's in a way both empowering and useful for all of us to remember. I think we start wrapping up 5 or 7 questions that we have. And Geeta, may I request you for this one question? All of us here represent institutions which have much better tech infrastructure, or certainly IB schools in any case will have. What would your simple advice be, for schools that do not have the privilege of this infrastructure? What are the basic and fundamental changes can they make? Any advice?
So, I can come in probably, Geeta, and
Sure.
then you all can follow in. Both Microsoft and Google are easy to use platforms, and they're both free actually yes, it's a free platform. So because if you are an educational institution, Microsoft and Google, their basic plans, they provide it free of cost to all schools. And I think, there is no going away from having a virtual learning platform, or if I may put it together, a learning management system through which you can let the children and the teachers communicate and set work or get work done. How you want to do it, what quantum of work, that's all different thing. But I think there is no running away from that. And it's very basic. If you have a school server, which most schools have, I don't foresee why schools cannot, even with limited infrastructure, even with limited finances, cannot get that, because devices are there in every houses today. Yes, they might not have the connectivity. Yeah. So I think that bit connection, there is no running away from today.
Great. So I think for all of the other schools which might not have as great resources, important to remember that both Google and Microsoft can offer free solutions. And I think on another interesting panel that I was recently, I think this phone first approach to learning, because even if people don't have laptops, and in India, in multi-generational houses where there might be one desktop with 6 or 7 people using it, and the parents have to also use it for work. The fact is that most homes will have multiple phones at least. And I think how can we start thinking about a phone first learning delivery for students who don't come from personal laptop sort of households, which is actually the most largest number of students. Geeta, anything that else you want to comment here? I want to end with Marie on questions of effectiveness of online learning, because most of the other questions are around that.
Right.
Any tip for schools?
What Abhimanyu said, yes, Microsoft Teams and Google Classroom have been part of our session. Zoom still continues to be there, just of these additional features, but we have started phasing that off, that we at least are using, because Google Classroom embedded with Google Meet just seems very wholesome. So we continue to use that. Along with that, we have embedded Padlet, which is again a free resource for people whenever it comes in as a feedback. We are using Quizlet, we are using Socrative. These are all free resources, available. Fortunately, all these tech leaders have made it available. Flipgrid, another very good resource for children to give, the lesson learning when you're using it as a flipped classroom. So these are lovely tools which every school can just start experiment and start using it. So we haven't had issues. Exam.net, especially for higher grades, is what we have experimented along with Zoom, which Abhimanyu was talking about. And they have been phenomenally, at least the closest what we could do in reality in a physical space, so that academic integrity is maintained.
Excellent. So I think any ambitious, thank you so much. I think for all ambitious school leaders from, please don't feel limited by the fact that lot of this will cost a lot of money. There are solutions that you can access for free, and there is no perfect. This is going to be a journey. It's better to get started and have something rather than think that there is a perfect suite that will solve all your purposes. Last question, really, and this is to Marie, and this is, I'm just sort of paraphrasing and converging 4 or 5 questions that have come from the audience. All of it, Marie, are to do with, okay, we're talking about all of this. Are online classes even effective? Is the quality of learning the same? And especially, we've talked enough about the IBTP and how what a challenging program is that. It can a program like that genuinely be delivered fully online?
Well, I mean, I think that we need to take into account that delivery is happening in a variety of ways and not just online. So, there's the contact, there's the classroom setting of the virtual platform, of course, and to me, the idea there is to look for ways to engage student in meaningful work and not just a presentation of content. And so, to the extent that teachers can do that, and that's really about creating a nimble environment for the teachers so they can flip back and forth. And I think that the technologies that you have presented offer a lot of opportunities for student engagement. So the online is the platform, but the delivery happens in a variety of ways. And so I say that so long as we're aware of that and that students are taking advantage of the different ways of learning, then yes, I think an online curriculum can happen effectively. It's going to take perhaps a little bit of a stretch to be able to recreate the environment of a science lab, but I think that there's enough creativity and engagement on the part of teachers and students, then even that can be overcome. And really just keeping in mind that students have always been co-responsible for their learning. And so even on an online platform, that is part of the equation.
And also, would it be also true to say that the fact is that a fully online learning delivery model, even a significant, at least for this school, of online being a core medium of this, we'll all only learn what happens to learning outcomes and effectiveness, right? That for none of us, we know for sure exactly what's going on, and that it's okay to be honest, whether it's with parents and students, to say that we've all been forced into this phase of experimentation. And while we're hopeful and optimistic, the fact is we need to learn much more before we know that this is the perfect system, right?
Right. And to me, the question of a perfect system is kind of an interesting one, because I would say to you that we are constantly learning. So lifelong learning is not just an attribute for students, it's an attribute for all of us. So all teachers, all administrators, we are all engaged in lifelong learning, and that means reevaluating and continuously assessing how we're doing things and looking for ways to improve. The growth mindset becomes even more important when we move into a virtual world, and to keep in mind that that's something that IB encourages strongly, is that continuous self-assessment, both by the school, by the teacher, by the student, and then using that flexibility and nimble-mindedness to consider new approaches that allow for more learning and more meaningful growth.
Okay, great. Thank you to all of you. There was just one last conversation we couldn't have, was around the relationship of the school with the parents at a time like this, in terms of fee rebates and fee discounts and all of the other thorny issues that have come up. But we'll take that to another time. Thank you for all of you for joining us, and